to welcome Karin, Marianne, and Renee. If you don't know who they are, you need to Google them. But rather than have me explain it, they're just going to introduce themselves. So we start off with Karin.
Hello everyone, I'm Karin Simondon and I'm Global Sustainability Manager at LTP Group. And LTP is a manufacturer of garments, and especially technical, outdoor and sport garments.
Hello, my name is Marianne Tochtermann. I'm very happy to be here and I hope we can really discuss everyone today, consumers, transparency and circularity. I have a background in business development and management consulting, but for the past 10 years I've worked with sustainability in fashion and furniture. And I advise Danish and Scandinavian companies and their management teams and investors on sustainability strategies, transparency, plans, that's the difficult part, and integrating this in business operations.
Yes, hello, also from my side. My name is René. I'm working at Vaudi as the Innovation Manager. And yeah, so I'm really happy to be here and it's a fantastic fair. It's really, really great. After now such a long time, really, really nice. So just enjoying it right now. So I'm giving...
Don't pass it back, Renee. For those of you who did not pay attention to December's performance days, it was all around bioplastics, so polymers from a natural source. Renee gave the keynote. It is a keynote. There were 4 presentations worth listening to, but the keynote is the thing that you should go back. Bioplastics is the middle of everyone's conversation at the moment. Renee has actually explained it so I could understand, which I liked. But Renee, can I come back to you with what do you hope by being on this panel? What do you want to achieve? What do you want the audience to learn? And what do you want to listen to?
Yeah, so I'm just hoping they're enjoying what we are saying a bit about circularity and also how we are reducing our emissions in the end and why this is an important topic and why this reducing our emissions is not just like a trend or just like a hype or just a buzzword. It is like, for the next decades, one of the biggest challenges what we have in the end. And it would be good also to get to know what are the questions from the audience regarding this topic. And so I can just say from my side, from my perspective, from our company perspective, how we are seeing it, what we are doing, and also what are our ambitions in this case.
Should I answer the same? Very good. When I looked at the topic, transparency, consumers and circularity, I was thinking about there are definitely 3 themes. We already started discussing it on LinkedIn. And one big topic is, of course, consumption. And this is where consumers can really make a difference. Just consume less. Wear their pieces 100 times and not 10. And let's not forget that when we talk about circularity and all the different levers. That is the lever. The second topic is about metrics. There are so many sustainability metrics going on here. If you look at the fair today, everything here is sustainable. For a consumer, this is really, really difficult to understand. And I don't have a lot of trust in these metrics. When consumers buy clothing, they decide on design and prices, and everything else come way lower. So if we want behavioral changes, we need to go there. And when you see metrics, a lot of the assumptions are intransparent, they're complicated, and they're actually more important for the metric as the metric itself. So it can be also very difficult to communicate. And the last topic I would love to discuss is that when we discuss circularity, often it's about fibers and materials. But if circularity is also about energy consumption and emissions, we need to go beyond that. Because if you look at the footprint of a product, it's only 20% that's coming from these fibers. 70% is coming from the dyeing, from the spinning, and from the weaving and the knitting. And we need to go there. It's more difficult to explain to a consumer, but it will have more impact.
I pretty much agree with Marianne. I think there is a big role for consumer to play to actually reduce carbon impact in the industry. There is a role, but this role is still quite theoretical in the sense that consumer are not able to make the right decisions when it comes to purchase and when it comes to the usage phase, which is between 13 to 20% of the impact of a product. So there is a role, there is a possibility, but there is no empowerment from the players in the chain, at least not enough. So from a manufacturer perspective, I think what is important is to what we say, unlock transparency from other players in the chain towards the consumer. Try to have direct communication between different players, consumers, and the other way around. So that's what I would really like to discuss also with all of you today, how to really do it, because it's actually not that easy. We will work with very complex supply chains, a lot of different players, and also even the definition of transparency can be very different depending on the perspective. But I would say the perspective from manufacturers, maybe also material suppliers, is that we miss this direct information both ways.
Now, we've told you what we're interested in, but this is meant to be an interactive session. You will have slightly different views. So try and catch my eye if you want to interrupt, if you want to say something and contribute to the discussion. But what I want to do to initiate it is actually the one subject that designers and developers don't like talking about is the metrics, doing the numbers. We naturally shy away from the figures. So I want to ask the audience, this show has aligned with HIGG, which is the platform provider for the Sustainable Apparel Coalition's principles, and it's interpreted as the HIGG Index. Can I just have on a show of hands, how many people are actually using the HIGG Index already? Oh, okay. Thank you for that. The bit that interests most of us is the tool called the Material Sustainability Index, the MSI. Now, the MSI is actually available free of charge online. Can I ask for a show of hands, how many people use the MSI already? Which is essentially the same number of the people who buy into it, okay? Here's a prompt to the rest of you. It's available free of charge. Go and use it. But the first panel question, which I want to start with, I want to know, one, if you use the HIGG Index, why is it so good? Remembering that any metric is based on previous evidence, so therefore it's out of date. So as Marianne pointed out, we can wander around the whole show, and I have already seen 15 different indexes used at this show. Why is it the HIGG is the one that we're all talking about? Karin, start off with you.
So we have started to use the HIGG MSI recently. I would say what is very good with it is that it's a common tool. So basically, from a manufacturer side, if a brand wants to have data on our footprint or products footprint, we don't have to fill in a lot of Excels. And we might give them data that is not calculated the way they do it. With the HIGG, we make sure that the input data across the supply chain is aligned between players, and that the brands with one click can just download this and then calculate the footprint of the product towards the end. It's also nice to have, emission factors that are updated, that are based on LCAs. A lot of them are industry average, maybe not specific to some suppliers, but there is an option for suppliers to also bring on their own data. So going forward, I think it's very powerful. There is, in my point of view, alignment in the industry that that's the next tool. And this also makes things much easier for everyone to align, to share the same tool and avoid, a lot of different types of reporting platforms or calculations. This being said, it's a work in progress. And for me, it's still not enabling companies to look at alternative materials. So basically say, I should use, a fabric of that composition from that supplier instead of that supplier. And I think this is the big, hopefully it will come, but that's still the challenge with it, because of the data accuracy that is still on industry average instead of player-specific average.
Should I take another opinion? I use the MSI because I don't have a
Best
better
thing is
alternative.
that we don't agree as a group, so this is where it starts to get good.
Because there isn't a better alternative, unfortunately. I have a lot of hope, especially in the FEM. So the tool where supply chain over time can put in real data, and then we can get much better data. At this point in time, there's lots of old LCA in the MSI, and you probably, if you follow it closely, you will see a lot of criticism about it, unfortunately, but that just shows in general the stage of emissions calculations where we are today. For the past couple of years, I was working with many different agencies that are measuring CO2. And you get a factor 3 if you go as an indifference when you work with different agencies. It's just not science yet, or it's not very precise, and I think the MSI is reflecting that. I would hope that the HIGG index would have so much money or prioritize to invest some millions and make really good new LCAs.
The HIGG MSI is the entrance for people who are not that familiar with LCA metrics, because that's what it's all about. It's about metrics, about LCA data, and people are thinking and people are asking always, okay, what is a sustainable material? What is a sustainable fabric? Is this sustainable or is this better than the other one? So people want to have like black and white answers in the end. And we can say, yeah, we got some metrics, we got the LCA data, they're in the HIGG index, in the MSI, so we can compare it with each other and say, this is good, that's bad. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, because the problem is first based on the LCA itself, because you don't know how the LCA has been performed, how it's been done, what has been calculated in, and what's not. For example, is the biogenic carbon uptake in it, so in the CO2 emissions or not? It should be not, by the way, according to the general LCA methodologies, but sometimes it's in. Also, HIGG is not making here a differentiation into that, meaning I can compare in the end product A and product B from company X, but I cannot compare product A from company X with product B from company Epsilon. I cannot compare them because I don't know how those LCAs are been done. So meaning in the end, when I now want to go into the comparison of different materials, it's getting very complicated because I don't know where is the data exactly coming from. I can see it in the MSI, there are some sources, but how they have been done, according to which methodology, I cannot see. So I cannot compare it because I'm comparing Apple with peers. One example here also is I'm taking an LCA output data from a supplier. And they're mentioning it is CO2 neutral. That is what they mentioned, and also this is like an external LCA, got a review perhaps as well. And then I'm looking in the HIGG index and I see it's definitely not climate neutral, so it's got a pretty high CO2 emissions. So which data I should trust now? So, but that's now the bad side. The good side of it is, in the end, I got a comprehensive overview, and I can get a first understanding, and I can get a first impression of how much is or how high is the impact of the material if I'm using this or that. So I can play for myself with it a bit around, especially as a designer, and this helps a lot in the end. The question is, of course, should I make every decision now based on HIGG? No, I would not say that. So HIGG is good to get generic LCA data. I can set those as a benchmark when I get now my own material, where I got from my supplier the known LCA, which should also always have an expert review in the end to be validated, of course. Otherwise, yeah, you can cheat a lot there. If you are quite clever in it, you can cheat a lot with LCAs, and you can look, every material can look fantastic and can look also in the end climate neutral. But we are not helping in the end the problem we have in the end. So last thing, I just know I'm just talking a lot now, but last thing I would just like to mention is about also transparency here. you see, when you're starting with the MSI, you're starting with a raw material. But then when you're going to a fabric and you build up virtually your fabric, you see the complexity, how complex it is to build up a complete fabric virtually, where every product, yarn formation and so on, finishing, woven, weaving and so on is in there. It is super complex, and this actually gives you a bit of sensibility in the end, how much work is in a fabric and why a fabric is so precious in the end.
René, I just wanted to ask you a question. LCAs are really, really expensive, and for most companies, you can't just go out and do it, but actually that's what you want. What are you doing at VD?
So we are not doing our own LCAs because it doesn't make any sense, because it's, as you mentioned, too expensive. And with what do we want to compare it? We can compare it with our own products in the end, but then we would need to do an LCA on more or less all products we have, or on specific product categories. It would be just too much work and just too much effort for us. So what we're doing is, in the end, we're looking very specifically on the LCA data of our raw material supplier, because we're going upstream in our supply chain, not only to the textile supplier, we're going to the chemical industry, because where you got kind of validated data is about the raw material, about the chips. When it comes to the yarn formation, you need to question, is it now a 20 denier, is it now a 70 denier? And this has dramatic influence in the end and dramatic impact. So that's why we're looking at that, but this is not for us like the selection criteria in the end. It is just like a slide proof that when we make a sustainable message or bringing out a sustainable claim to some new technology we brought to the market, this is just underlining it, that it's not just bullshit what we are talking about, that we got some, at least some kind of specific metrics and kind of scientific metrics.
Now, I'm going to summarize that, and forgive me for patronizing you guys. This is a group of 3 people who all use HIGG MSI. They're very familiar with the workings, and you can tell how we all use it in a slightly different way. If I was to give you a hint, look at the bigger strategic role. When you're looking for precise detail, it might not be good enough. But we have the difference between yarn engineering, but have you considered, for instance, the footprint of moving your finished garments here? If you have a really good garment, and Valde are known for having excellent with your green label, but if their shipping policy or their social welfare policy of their employees could do with improvement, the HIGG will actually flag up, rather than trying to make a brilliant product perfect, perhaps you should put attention into other areas. But it is a quagmire, and tomorrow we have 3 presentations. But I'm just going to chuck in some vague figures. If we're talking polyester, regular polyester has a HIGG of about 15. If we use recycled polyester, it can come down to 7.5. But by the time you add on the dyeing and the finishing process, it can easily be back up to 15 or 18. So there are a lot of components, and these are the variables. When the principle of the HIGG index first started, the idea was that it was a self-reflective process. So you did it every 3 months, 6 months, and you showed progress. So you didn't have the best product, but it was getting better the whole time. But I want to flip this around now. Now we've done the boring heavy bit, and people still aren't sticking up their hands. You're welcome to interrupt us and ask the questions. I want to flip it right over to the other side. Something that has already been mentioned. The consumer is really confused because we put a badge and they just think the badge means it's good. And they can't tell the difference between all the various badges. So we've had the top down. Can I ask you your views for what you listen to the consumers and how much clarity there is about whether they get your message, whether they understand your message, and whether they can differentiate? So do you want to start? Karin, thank you.
Well, I would say the dialogue
These questions are not pre-rehearsed, by the way, so these guys are thinking on stage.
That's true. No, but I mean, for a manufacturer, having a dialogue with the end consumer is a new thing. It's a new thing for us, but it's something we've really started working on by developing an app on some products that consumer can access and get direct insights into the manufacturing, the factories, our own footprint. And just to go back to what you mentioned about the fabric is precious, a garment is precious. It's a carbon footprint, it's a use of water, of chemicals. It's also a lot of work from people sitting in factories. Even if it's under very good conditions and good wage, there's a lot of people working on garments before they end in a shop. There is a whole life for a product before it ends up in a shop. And I think as a manufacturer, if we can bring this to the end consumer, they would really look at the garment differently, respect them, take care of them, and maybe really think when they buy and when they dispose of garments.
I can say. I think the consumer is incredibly confused. They see so many labels, they see so many certifications, and they see so many claims. And that is just very, very complicated and very difficult. And we do this for business. They just do this for pleasure. They will never invest so much time as we will do on these topics. I only believe in price.
Yeah, the consumer is confused because there are so many labels out there, so that's why we put another label on it, onto the market. So we have our own label in the end. But the reason for it is that when we started with that, was years ago, there was nothing existing on the market which displayed and also showed the entire eco-design, kind of the eco-design label. It was just simply not existing, what covered all the different stages in the cradle-to-cradle aspect. So that's why we created our own meta label in the end, where a lot of different standards, but not only standards, also qualitative data is inside there, which we just recently renewed, and which will be also in the next months accredited, so it will be like an official standard in the end. And this we are trying, of course, then to give to the end consumer a bit more trust. But I totally agree what you said. The most important thing is the full transparency. We're trying to give this with our green ship. We're trying to give the best we can do with our sustainability report, which is an interactive website in the end, where you can click through more or less every topic you would like to know something about it, and where we have a statement through. And showing that it's a craftsmanship, showing that the products, as you mentioned, not only the textiles have a value, the product is such a long value chain, what we're having here, where so many people are involved, and it's still not much is automatic. So there are people behind, people doing the best, working on the best quality, brands and factories together, working for better working conditions. And also, so we need to show this to the end consumer. And when we're showing this transparency to the end consumer, first, the consumer can judge for themselves. So if he likes what he sees or she sees or not in the end. But that's the first thing. And you should know about the transparency, what is going on there, because then you know exactly where are some areas where I need to improve. But this you need to know first.
Now, I'm in another patronizing way going to try and sum up. So what we're looking at is that so much attention is paid to the supply end, the front end. But actually where it makes the difference is when the consumer owns the garment, because that potentially should be the biggest footprint. Now, don't feel embarrassed. We do want customers to hold on to their garments for longer. So I have no problem with the biggest footprint being from that way. But whilst this crew just relax a bit, because no one's asking questions, I'm going to start to challenge you. Do I take it that I've got people listening in who are textile specialists? Yes? I've got some nodding heads. Okay, for the people who haven't heard me talk before, I always talk about washing machines, which is where the biggest carbon footprint and the wastewater come into effect during the consumer ownership. Can I ask people to put up their hands if they have done a service wash on their washing machine in the last 4 months? If you have, right, I've got Anne, Kate, have you? Okay, so I've got one person in the whole room. I'm not going to talk the detail about a service wash. You can find me afterwards, but I will give you one little bit of information. If you do a service wash on your washing machine every 50 washes or so, your washing machine will last twice as long. It's like servicing a car. If you don't service your car, you wear it out really fast. Do the same to your washing machine. If you guys open the door to your washing machine and put your finger in the rubber ring and you feel that detergent gunk, you desperately need to do it. But look, I'm trying to stimulate a bit of interactivity, but also highlight that information is a wonderful thing now. And we've noticed over the last 2 years, much more direct communication from the consumers to the brands. So there is an opportunity to exchange information. Whereas these three are all being very honourable, and I am patronising them by pointing out things that you already know, the customer will access information if we provide it. And possibly that should be a role that we're looking towards. But I want to go back into this customer thing, and I want to concentrate on one of the biggest problems associated with the apparel industry is fast fashion. It's almost an easy victim. We all want to point towards the bad and say we don't do fast fashion. But our garments are sometimes treated as fast fashion. And to me, we've been trying to solve fast fashion for far too long, and we keep on failing. So I have different views. Personally, I think we just have to accept fast fashion, and it's a phase people grow out of, and I would like fast fashion to be made from better materials. But it brings to mind, how can we change consumer behavior? Because as was pointed out, I do some work for the British Government Waste Resources Action Programme. Up to 70% of the behavior change when the garment is owned can be reduced. Over half of it can be reduced. So even if you're making a garment out of really bad materials, if customers are going to keep on using it, that will have a better overall impact than having the most perfect garment in the first place. So to come back into behavior change, can I ask you three to illustrate where you have tried to get the customers to change the way they interact with the garments, and what reflections can we take away? So in other words, where did you get it wrong? What have you learned from it? And what can they take away to get better behavior? Please. And remember, we've got questions. Before you answer that, I'm just taking the first question.
Hi guys. I just want to ask a question regarding how do you teach, how do you make it more transparent, and how, like, I feel it's so hypocrite as a brand. You want more sale, and at the same time the consumer are all overwhelmed by all the labels, all the green, all the claims, and at the same time I feel like, where can we as a community, because I don't think it's a brand responsibility, I think it's a responsibility of the government, for example schools and brands, to come all together and find actually a project and a program where you evolve and teach from smaller, like already from school. Do you think that would be an option to, because we have so many projects, so many pop-ups where you want to be more transparent, tell like grüne Knopf and all this, and it sounds all great, but at the same time I don't want to call big brands names now, but then they are pushing with all these YouTube, social media, like how cool the products are, but at the same time I still miss enough transparency for the youth, who are actually the main buyer for fashion, for example. So we can do all the index and all the LCAs, but I don't think if we teach the generation from little, like what impact our clothes has on the world, I believe we're not gonna have a change. And I'm a very positive person, but I'm also very realistic. And I think I also agree, unfortunately, a lot with Marianne about the price. It's always in the end the price, which make it so difficult too. So how do you see this whole thing? Don't we like miss teaching? We are not enough teaching, like the youth and the children, not only the parents.
No. If I can summarize the question, it's two questions. One is, should we be changing the business model? At the moment, we rely on making more profit by selling more stuff. Is there a role that we can do as brands to change that? And part two of the question is, how successful has education been with especially the younger generation? I see a lot of Gen Zs, because they're on my university course, they're coming through now, and there is distinct behaviour change, but I want to listen to you. Is that the two questions, would you say, fairly? So, René, you've got the microphone.
Yeah. So to the second question, how we can teach it, how we can bring it into the education. So here I'm looking back, it was last year in May where I participated at the UNESCO World Conference, where it was also about education of sustainability and how sustainability should be, and also circularity should be integrated into education plans, not only in Germany, of course, or worldwide. So, and we came also to the conclusion that sustainability should not be like an additional subject been taught in schools or in university. It should be aligned in more or less every subjects. So everywhere it needs to be kind of a green thread which is going through all the different subjects. Yeah, those are the basics in the end, but you can also...
We can't hear you.
But if you don't have the basics, that's the point.
Exactly, and those is our...
I agree, it should be aligned, but if you don't have even the foundation of an understanding of young people, of parents, how can you align it to every subject?
So actually governments are working on that. This is so to get the basics in the end.
Can I put an idea to you? We're in Europe. The European Outdoor Group is the trade body which our brands work with the most. The European Outdoor Group flipped a couple of years ago in that rather than having sustainability specialists as an add-on, they now have sustainability in everything they do. So what René said, they've taken the lead and they're illustrating to us. They have specialists in support of the information, but their core, their boring, their undercurrent is sustainability with business on top. But René, I interrupt.
Yeah, what was the first question? Can you just repeat?
First question, should we change the business model? We're making money by selling more stuff.
Yeah.
What can we do different?
So in the end, if we would do nothing at all now, especially the business model of fast fashion would be changed anyway. So it would be changed automatically because the raw material prices are going insanely up, the labor costs going up, everything is going up from the cost. So the cheap fast fashion model won't be existing in this phase for that long. So that's the good news. Of course, the bad news is that those companies are finding ways to get cheap feedstock, textile recycling, and but there are also more options in the future, and especially now it's like, well, I'm also getting too old for that now, but I see a lot of potential for fashion, for fast fashion in the metaverse. I see it in digital fashion, fashion which you cannot wear actually, what maybe you can make it then up to measure if you want to, but where you're just buying it, where you're buying the NFTs about it, and there is so much coming up right now. The very big brands are going into that. They are also having NFTs out there. From some products, Adidas has it, Nike has it, so many have it, and it's really, really interesting because here you can go completely crazy. And to be honest, is there so much improvement in design of clothing, what we're wearing? I don't know in the end, frankly speaking, I would say personally not. But when you're going digitally in the virtual room, you have so many more possibilities to be creative, to just create new shapes, and somehow a part of us will live in the metaverse in the next decades. Hopefully not myself, but I don't know.
Would either of you two like to contribute? So the two questions: change the business model, and can you tell us anything about how successful, especially the younger generation, education has been?
No, but I completely agree. Education is a large part of it, and of course you should have that in schools. And I agree with the digital. I mean, maybe fast fashion in the future, it's hopefully digital. But what I have been working with brands on is really focusing on how can we increase the number of wears for our products. And that is then especially also in sportswear, increasing occasions. How can you make sure that your consumers are wearing your products many times during the day? That's just what, it's not completely changing the business models, but it is at least focus on getting these 10 times up to 100 times that we want. And that's what we should educate on every product. That's very easy to understand. And I agree with you, Charles, that when you talked about that you grow out of fast fashion, and it's very easy to bash fast fashion. I would actually like to understand on premium and luxury goods, the people that own these pieces, including myself, do I wear them more than a young person having fast fashion? I'm not sure. We just have overfilled closets. So it starts also with us. And I can't teach my teenage daughters not to drink if I drink red wine every night. It's the same thing.
I see the two questions or topics being related, actually, because I think that the business model of, selling as much as possible won't stop when people won't be educated and will stop buying as much as they are, because they would really understand the impact. They would understand, not maybe in details, a lot of data, but they would understand, where it happens and how to mitigate it. And when they understand this, they would buy less. They would really think twice. And I think the new generation is already very aware of it. So if they, on top of it, get this information in education, it will be like a virtual circle. And I also see a positive trend to also think positively a bit, that I think the global supply chains of consumer goods, not only garments, has developed based on pressing cost, and that has meant, production very far away from the marketplace. It has meant that each player is actually sourcing for many players, so they can actually have, competition between them they reduce price again. And the transparency and the data coming up is reversing that trend, meaning there is a concentration of the supply chains, because for a brand to control information going out, they cannot source from too many players, and same for the other players above. And they also need to show good results. So they need to work with fewer partners that are going in the same direction. So somehow we also see reshoring, like production being closer to market distribution places. So those new trends for me are a sign that this is starting to happen. And basically this will redefine the business model.
Now, at the start of this month, we had the American version of Performance Days. It's known as the Functional Fabric Fair. It's across in Portland on the West Coast. When you go to Portland, there are two big sporting giant companies with their world headquarters there. Under Armour's more towards the East Coast. I was able to go and see the metaverse that René was talking about, and they were able to take me into their factories so that I could understand more about the process. That, to me, was really intelligent application of it. But what I want to do is unfortunately for us, we're no longer in the physical world alone. We have virtual people tuning into this, and we have a virtual question that is going to be brought forward. I'm going to come to you after that. So first, the virtual question.
Yeah, the virtual question is, how many of the users, designers of HIGG MSI do you think are as informed and reflected users as René? And what risk does this lack of knowledge pose?
You take it.
No, I will not.
Hold on, René.
Hi. Well, actually, I don't have a question. I just want to tag on something that has been said. So I agree. I've heard the concept that is very close to me. It's the cradle to cradle. And that's, I think, one of the shifts that an industry should need. So in any kind of design, so designers should always, and everyone involved, should always keep in mind the end of life cycle. So that is fundamental, and it is the major shift. We all should participate in sustainability. Just the example earlier on the washing machine, which I remember you mentioned on the podcast. That's not only that's a great thing, but we can stop using aggressive detergent. I don't use detergent. I don't use conditioner, softener. I use baking soda, and I'm sure that is fully loaded my washing machine, and I do maybe once per week. So obviously it depends on family and something. So. Obviously, the nearshoring is also important. So there's several steps that can be done, and sustainability should be part of every single process. So quality or product integrity is sustainability because it makes it more durable product. It lasts longer, and then it can be upcycled, can be repaired. And I don't know, you can do buttons that are screw instead of stitched, and then you just unscrew, and then you got maybe organic material that can again be reused and recycled. So definitely a shift again on the way that we shop and then we consume. Obviously, that's we all should basically play our own part. So, and definitely cradle to cradle is the way to go for the future. Not only for the apparel and textile, but basically for everything that we should design, mobile phones or anything basically. So that's it. Thank you.
We're going to come back to this point later, but I want to ask the virtual question. Renee, Karin, do you want to start off with the virtual question, please? Oh.
I mean, I can take it. I think it's a fair point that the MSI is a professional tool for people who can know how the data is entered, how to read the data and challenge the data. However, I think it's still the best tool we have now, and I think that the MSI is also made for, professionals in the industry to understand this data. And this is a responsibility of the players who have to read this data to also, learn and get up to speed. I think HIGG also have some other tools for the end consumers, which are much more digestible, easily to understand. I'm not familiar with that tool, but I think there's also, a specific platform for consumers.
I would like to add one thing regarding to the MSI, to the HIGG, and why I'm often very skeptical about it and give a lot of negative feedback perhaps is because I like it in the end, because I would like that it's been involved, that it's getting better. That
we know it's going to get better, and the more we put in, the better it gets.
Exactly. But coming to the point that how many people can use it in the end, and I reflected. It was, I guess, almost 1.5 years ago, or 2 months, it was within the Corona time, so 1.5 years ago, where I was attending on a HIGG MSI workshop. And they, so the coach, so the trainers, he gave a homework for the people who wanted to do it, and it was to rebuild virtually a super basic fabric. So he was giving the denier and then bidding a super simple fabric virtually. And the next day, they were showing the results. Everyone, so it was 20 people who participated in the end, everyone had a complete different result. Everyone. So, and it was a super basic, simple fabric. And when it's already so complicated on this simple fabric, how complicated would it be then on complex fabrics, on laminates and on entire products in the end? So that should be a bit more easier in the future, because otherwise you're just getting some results out, but are those validated? And there's also a big question, are those results I'm getting out? Is the data I'm getting out, is this validated? That's a big question mark in the end.
That being said, I think the sustainability capabilities in fashion companies are increasing exponentially at the moment. Over the past 2 years, during the pandemic, people have really become much more educated, which also means that the people working with MSI, they know more about it than they did 2 years ago. In Denmark, where I'm from, you get public funding, or the smaller companies get public funding just to educate themselves on sustainability. And I mean, you see that in the companies.
Now, we're going to run out of time because Charles is on a panel. And can I point out, Renee and I might be grumpy middle-aged men. Good job we have some enthusiastic people between us. But that's not to the point. I'm going to ask the panel actually now to sum up what they would like you, the audience, to take away from this session. So what was their interesting thing, and what should we do as a group to take away? But I want to start with your point, if I can illustrate it. People have heard this from me before. We talk about durability, and as an industry, we're fascinated by physical durability. The Martindale machine, for instance. Yarn engineering has improved so much over the last 70 years, we're not actually wearing garments out that regularly now. But what we do have are two changes: fit durability, and since I started in this industry, things have gone south on me, so I need a slightly bigger waistband. But more importantly, we have emotional durability, which is how long do I love that garment for enough to keep wearing it? And can I point out, we're entering the fourth industrial revolution. We're entering customization. We can make the garments more individual. How forward-facing are you? The consumer now wants to adapt themselves, because the biggest paranoia is that rather than me turning up in the same shirt as Renee, when I go to Functional Fabric Fair Shanghai, there'll be 10 people wearing it. It's a whole world challenge now. So my sum up, I would like a further session on emotional durability, because I think there's more ground in it. But can I ask you three, what are your takeaways from this session, and what should they be doing?
A garment is precious. It has an impact, will always have. A lot of people have made it, and this deserves care and respect. I would also say that the consumer has potentially a huge role to play if they are given the right information. And I'm not talking about a lot of technical data. At least know how is the product made, where is it made, what are the steps of the process. And I still think today this is unknown from most of people worldwide. And then I would also say for professionals that, of course, materials is still the big area to investigate and to work on when it comes to data, impact, and choices for new products to be made.
I think the most important part is to really, design high quality, durable products. It's not so surprising. And then as a profit maximizing growing company, you just need to find a model to still be able to grow and make profits when your consumers are wearing your clothes more times and longer.
Yeah, so I did a big mistake 3.5 years ago because there was a time where I was on a conference. Actually, it was my own conference in Taiwan. It was quite funny. I developed there the word emotional durability before anyone else in the industry used it. And then suddenly, 1 year ago, one Scandinavian outdoor company used it also just in public. It was very annoying, I have to say.
The British companies now using it as
Even
well.
British companies, so it's super annoying in the end. But it's just my personal failure in the end. But in the end, it's all about it in the end. It is all about emotional durability. And this is the most important thing, what we can give to the customer, what we can teach the customer, that he is reinventing it, that he is reinventing this emotional feeling of getting a garment, of buying a garment, that he is attached to it. And even if it gets some holes, some scratches in, it is in the end just an archive of all your adventures. And in the end, it's just like the human skin. So where you got scars, and every scar tells a story. So people should love their clothing back. And even if it got some damages, you can repair a lot of things today. And regarding the metrics, they are important. We need to quantify it. And there is hope at the end of the tunnel. In the end, there is some light, and it's not a train in this case. So we get the PEF, we get the product environmental footprint from the European Commission coming up, where we get, hopefully, then where the SAC is also involved, and then also HIGG, where we got an alignment in the end on the different LCA metrics, that we can finally compare HCA data. And if we are able to compare LCA data, then it's the next big step, and where we can do adjustments and where we can do changes.
That's brilliant. Before I sum up, can I just add something on top of what Renee said? RAB, the English brand, they repair your garments. We're seeing more repair centres being set up. They've just opened one in the Netherlands. They now offer you the choice. Do you want an invisible repair, so colour match fabric, or do you want contrast colour because you're proud to show off the scars? The industry is moving in the right way. But I'm waffling. Can you show your appreciation to these three who I think are raising the bar? Now, these three don't get to escape. I'm going to put them to the side of the stage, so if you want to have an individual conversation with them, you can pick on them. In 5 minutes' time, we have the next presentation, which is from the Microfiber Consortium. If you don't know what the Microfiber Consortium is, it is the body that is giving the best response to the media's assassination of us having fleece within our industry. They are the body that started looking at the metrics of how much does actually come off within the washing machine, but it has grown so much since then. 5 minutes' time, we've got Kelly and Sophie from the Microfiber Consortium. Go and grab a cup of coffee, come back, please.